So, we're going to try to do this in the first few minutes. We want to go around the room. I will write down the questions that we have, and we'll try to answer them today. And this is part of this idea of let's make this more responsive so that you get your questions answered, or we can at least try to answer your questions. Anybody like to start? Who are you? Why are you here?
I can start.
All right, Heidi.
I'm Heidi, and I'm with English as a Second Language. And this is peer review, right?
This is peer review, yeah.
Okay, so my question is to find out how people have used it in terms of timing, if you've used peer review before class, outside of class, in class, during class time, or maybe post-class. I'm particularly interested in your experiences of having students conduct peer review in class or out of class, the pros and cons of those approaches.
Good question. Good.
All right. Hi, I'm Tim, also in ESL. I'm here to contribute today. I've done a lot of peer review. I use a lot of my class time to do peer review, inside, outside, online.
All of the above?
And yeah, I'm also here to hoover up ideas too. So anything that you can share for peer review. I have to say I've been using the Canvas peer review function less and less.
Oh.
I didn't get booed out of the room. Okay, good.
No, we all just want to know your secrets.
Yeah. Naomi.
I'm Naomi Salmon. I work with Madison Teaching and Learning Excellence and the Excel Initiative, and I'm here to learn more about the assessment aspects of peer review. I was really excited about the rubrics discussion and some of the philosophies that underline that.
All right.
I'm Peter Van Can. Naomi kind of articulated it very well. I mean, I'm interested in the ways of incorporating peer review as a standard feature in a course, and so I have not used the peer review function in Canvas either because it didn't quite feel right to me. But so I've been using, a relatively straightforward system based on Google Docs and being able to put comments in, but I'm interested to see how other people approach the topic and maybe hopefully pick up some things that might be useful.
Great. Lynn.
Hello, I'm Lynn Prost. I teach in the biochemistry department, and I do use Canvas for peer review. I have for a paper assignment where students submit a paper to Canvas, and then they have a week to peer review, and then a week to turn in a final submission. So what I like about it is that I also have rubrics set up, and so the peers use the same rubric in the same format that I am ultimately going to grade. And so when I go to grade the final assignment, I can also go back and look at the rubric in Canvas that the peer filled out. So that I have found to really be kind of streamlined, as opposed to when I used to have people bring in a hard copy and like swap papers, and then I sort of lose track of what's happening. So I have liked that. I've had some technical issues, like if somebody submits a paper late, I don't know how to get them into the peer review system. So that's been a problem. I think I also have kind of maybe a more pedagogical question in terms of how do you encourage good peer reviews? And I feel really bad for the student that puts a lot of effort into a review, and then the review they get back just says like, "Great job." So
We don't have to do that because we do that for student papers as well, right? We do all of this stuff and they don't even look at it. All right, great. We'll talk about that. Tom.
I'm Tom Karakis. I support Canvas for doing AT, and I'm just here to hear what you all have questions about as far as peer reviews and how you may utilize it in Canvas.
Excellent. James?
James McKay, also from the Learning W team. I'm just here to make sure John behaves himself.
Here for the bagels.
That's what I heard.
Margaret.
Hello, I'm Margaret. I'm a grad student at the iSchool. Also here to make sure that John behaves himself.
Good. You guys
Must be right.
you need help. Bring more people.
I'm Erin. I teach Spanish online through independent learning, which is part of continuing studies. So all of my classes are online,
and they're asynchronous. So we haven't used peer review yet, but in the future, we might have some changes and we want to use it. And we're expecting a lot of growth. So how would you use peer review with like a lot of students? in one class?
Good.
That's sort of what I'm wondering about here.
All right, Lauren?
Well, I'm Lauren Rosen, and I direct the collaborative language program, so it's a blended and online UW system program. And I was originally here to find out more about how to successfully use peer review in Canvas, but now I think I'm here to find out what the workarounds are so that you're more successful. So,
Often it doesn't matter what tools we use as long as it's successful, right? Although there are good university-supported tools that we should use.
yeah, whatever.
Hi, I'm Lori Berry. I work with UW Expanded Campus as an instructional designer, and I echo exactly what Lauren had said. I wanted to know how to use a peer review tool in Canvas, but now should I? Do something else. I don't know. I mean,
It's
kind of
good.
hear
It's
the
good. It's really good.
the good and bads of how to set it up and what maybe the best practices around using it are.
All right, thank you. Kelly?
I'm Gabi, I'm like Lori, I'm an instructional designer with Expanded Campus. And we just started migrating our programs to Canvas, and I have not used peer review at all, so I'm looking for basic knowledge.
All right, how to get started.
Yep.
Excellent. You're Karen.
I'm Karen Spader. I'm a DOS student in curriculum and instruction. And I am here also to share my experiences with peer review in Canvas. I like it. I'm using it currently. I would use it again. I have lots of insights.
Yeah, Canvas peer review is not bad. It's good. And I think that for me, it really helps me get started with it because the tools in it, for the most part, they work. There are questions about how do we have students give good advice rather than what they often do is they're like, good job, or I agree. And we see that in the discussions too, right? They just pat each other on the back because it's the polite thing to do, but ultimately not very helpful. So we have some information on the activity sheet today on resources on that, some quick tips, as well as links to deeper resources. And I failed to mention, and let me do that right now, that on the top of the activity sheet, we have instructions on how to get to this class and self-enroll. You can self-enroll into it. We don't use Canvas in the Active Teaching Lab very much or very well, but we do use it to embed the agenda and an activity sheet. And as a sort of a best practice, we have a link above here to open up the activity sheet in a new window because we recognize that with all of the extra paraphernalia on the sides here, it's hard to actually work in this. But this is an editable document, and you can edit it if you open up the window. At the very bottom, we've got an area for notes and other questions. So if you have other questions, go ahead and get into that, add them there, and we'll try to, or if you have resources that we don't have already, please add them there and help us be confident about this. So back to our agenda here. We know that social learning works. Students learn from each other. They do not always trust each other to be the experts, nor should they, but they should also not trust us to be the experts because there's new information happening all the time and we want to promote critical thinkers. So we can promote critical thinkers with their peers just as easily as we can promote critical thinkers with ourselves. The other reason that peer review and sort of this idea of social small group learning often works is because in a small group, you can pay very close attention to what the other people in the group need. When you're one person, you're facing a sea of hundreds or even 10 or 12, it gets harder, right? It's harder just socially as humans. We can't pay as close attention to everybody's needs. So breaking those groups into smaller things and having them give each other feedback, there's a better opportunity for their needs to be met because they can give off those cues and clues that the other person can pick up on and say, oh, I hear that you are interested in help about this thing. And as an instructor, we never be able to do that. Really. So peer review is actually one great way of doing this, provided they give good feedback. So that's, and maybe we should start off with that rather than with some of the technical things. How do we get them to give good feedback? What has worked for those of you who have tried it in the past, or what has not worked for those of you who have tried it in the past? Lauren,
I teach constructive commenting.
what does that mean?
So that is teaching them to first find something that they liked about it, and then find something that was difficult and make a suggestion for how it could be better. So that it's not just a good job. And I use that myself also in commenting on students that I teach. So modeling it for them. So it's not just good job. Otherwise, they don't have anywhere to go. It doesn't show them, you know, how they can keep growing and learning.
Good, okay.
I just added a link to the lab notes to webpage where they've got really good like starter sentences to get people going. So things like, this made me think about, I wonder why, things like that. And so I just added a link to that page at the bottom under the lab notes. And I give that to students as well. Not necessarily the page, but like the comment starters.
I wonder too if you could use like a model, maybe previous students' work, and you could say, these students did this. This is a good one. This is an one. And this is not a good one. And then they have models where they can say,
We have a link to a previous lab that we did on peer review, and Tim Austin came and shared. He does that as well. He gets permission from past students, still anonymizes them, of course, but also includes, here's an example of a good one, here's the feedback that you might give on this one, here's an example of a bad one, here's the kind of feedback you might give on that, and here's an example of a one that needs a lot more work, and here's the kind of feedback that you might give on that. Modeling is great. And if you can find models from students to students, then it sort of takes the mythos away from it. Like you don't have to be an expert to be able to give this feedback. And it says this is what's reasonable, this is what other students have done. Therefore, it is reasonable for you to do it. Good. Somebody talked about, wait.
I just wanted to ask about that. Do you go through and grade the quality of the peer review?
Sometimes.
And do you have points that you actually?
I actually have students, excuse me. I also have students grade each other's quality of feedback too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that can be part of their grade. Because I think students who have taken the time to give those detailed comments and just got back, great job. Feel let down, feel disappointed. I always do try to bring in some research which shows that actually giving is more valuable than receiving in terms of peer feedback. That helps. But still there is that letdown of I really wanted some quality comments and all I got was great job. And so the student can at least tell me that. So.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, along these lines, another thing that I've actually done successfully is at the beginning of the class, told the students, you're going to be working in groups, there's going to be some peer review elements. And at the end of the semester, I'm actually going to have everybody rate everybody in their group. And then I actually had the students help build the rubric for what does that look like.
Let's talk about rubrics here, because I think that is rubrics help everybody be on the same page. They set expectations. They set expectations not only for the students, but for the instructor. Like getting it down and writing, this is what I'm looking for. It helps us have those dark thoughts as we're going through saying, this is terrible, and they're like, oh wait, I'm not grading on that. There you go. And stick to the rubric. It helps the students see what they need. It helps their peer reviewers, reminds them what they need. So they're not comparing it against what they did, they're comparing it against what the rubric is for assessment. They can also look at what they've done themselves and say, wow, here's somebody else's version of the assignment, and here's my version of the assignment. I should have stepped up a little bit more, or they did some cool things here that maybe I could next time incorporate into mine. And if you happen to do 2 or 3, quick show of hands, how many people have who do it only do 1 peer review, have the peers review only 1 of their peers?
Depends on the
Well,
assignment.
that's like in groups.
Do you, yeah, do you 2, 3?
And that helps balance out then.
Right, because that's the other thing, there's the, if I hate Tim, you know, I might be like, terrible, 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 terrible. But it'd be balanced by all the other people who love his work or don't know him and just judge him on his work, so it does help balance that.
I call it.
Has anybody done blind peer review where they don't know who they're reviewing, which
Yeah.
peer it is?
That's something you can do. We don't want to get technical, but that is something you can do quite nicely on Canvas.
You can.
And
You
not-
can.
There is a checkbox that is available, although I've recently read something about it's no longer available.
Oh, I looked this morning, it was there as a checkbox
Okay.
still. The thing that I had forgotten when I did this in class, and I have a fairly small class, okay? But as part of our submissions, the students write their name on the assignment. So although the peer reviewer was anonymous, they knew who
They
were
know who it
reviewing.
was because it was on the.
So I had to redo that the
Okay.
next time.
Yeah, good tip. Try to hide that as much as possible so that they're giving no names.
Yeah.
Is it better to do it that way, anonymously,
It
or?
depends.
It just depends.
You know, I do it for some, not
Right.
for others.
Again, part of learning is social clicks. Like
Right.
that's a natural thing that we gravitate towards people that we have an affinity towards. In the professional sense, ideally, when we send out articles to be published, it's anonymously reviewed. Realistically, we often recognize who those people are based on who they're citing and there's a lot of citations from this one person. Oh, who's that one person? The author of the article. So there are ways that they'll figure out or talk to each other
Right.
in the background as well, but what precautions are reasonable and what are not. Naomi?
I have the luxury of most of my experience around peer review is in the composition classroom, so we can devote a lot of in-class time to it. So structuring the conversations around that peer review, starting by saying like what has helped and hindered in the past to generate the collaborative rubric, but then setting some time to have groups of 3 meet and each person reads their colleagues' papers. And then while the writer is silent, their 2 peers talk about what they thought was really like exciting and strong and interesting, and then they talk about what they struggled with as readers, and then when they do their write-ups, it is only one person doing the write-up for the others, the sort of round robin style, but the person who receives the feedback then gets the synthesis of the 2 commenters' ideas that they heard but might not have internalized, and the writer gets to sort of put that in clearer terms.
And in some ways, this is a great example of universal design because they hear it and then they see the synthesis of it. And they're not just hearing it from one person, but they're hearing the discussion back and forth. They're hearing how the ideas are created, how they're built on each other. They say, oh, this idea is not to be developed. Yeah, it could have been developed more by da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, and I also think da-da-da-da-da. And then they get that built up. So it's not just the synthesis, but it's the thinking behind the synthesis. I love
Sometimes
that
the
idea.
enthusiasm.
Hard to do online, probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
With Collaborate Ultra, Blackboard Ultra, Collaborate.
Yeah.
Things like that, you could have that.
But they do then submit the peer reviews online for their colleagues using the tool and that stuff.
Great.
I've done something similar with triads where Naomi and Tim are looking at my thesis statement and they're giving me feedback, but I'm actually recording the feedback that they give me myself.
Oh,
So you're
that's
doing the
nice.
synthesis yourself?
Yes, but I kind of like the idea of someone else doing the synthesis and taking that load off, but that's just another option. So then, as you were giving me feedback, I'm noting down what is particularly helpful for me.
Right, yeah.
Or both? Like,
Mm.
it's
Oh, yeah.
easy for me to
Yeah.
synthesize what I'm getting out of it versus what they think that I should hear, and then be able to compare that and
Right.
say, huh, I just kept hearing, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And theirs is all like, constructive feedback, constructive feedback.
Right.
Good, I like the ideas. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the methods and practices. Should we start with in Canvas? Let's start with in Canvas. What does it look like? How do we do it? Step me through how I might do this. So I'm creating an assignment. Do I have one already? And I was supposed to do this one. Oh, wait, I've got a rubric, I've got an assignment, I've got a rubric for it. And down below, I've got some information about peer review here. I want to require a peer review. Here are the things where you can say, is it automatic or manually assigned according to groups? I'm gonna let you figure that out in a different, we've got other resources available on that, so I'm not gonna go into that. So let's talk about anonymity. Click on that checkbox.
You know, since we had one of the questions was about scale.
Yeah.
I think this is a good opportunity just to make a comment. So ITA for video games and learning, which has 160 students in it. And now part of this class is that they're split into discussion sections. So there's 8 20-person discussion sections. So I have 2 20-person discussion sections. So my general comment is, in a large class, you should never have all of the students all together in the first place. So there's that. Always break students down into smaller groups. I personally would not recommend over 10, but that's me. So that being said, let's assume we have a large class, we have small groups of 10 for the whole trajectory of the course. They're always working together, or at least when there is social learning, they're together. So I would never use the automatically assign. I always use the manually assign. Well, we do anyway because we want students within each section being partnered with people in their section. So now within my 20-person section, I put them into smaller groups yet. For one, they have a small group project, so I put them together based on interest. I can tell you about that if you were interested some other time. But then, so I manually assign within their small groups. And that can be complicated because all 160 students are enrolled in the primary course shell. So when you click on manually, you have to go to assign peer reviews. What I do then is I have my handy dandy handwritten list of the small groups. And I just use Control F find function on the web page. And I sit with my groups of 3 and I say, okay, person 1 gets person 2, person 2 gets person 3, person 3 gets person 1. And that's how I do it.
Okay.
Yes.
Small interjection. You mentioned about when students submit late. So this manually assigned peer reviews helps with that.
I was wondering, does automatically mess late assignments?
So automatically once that assignment is submitted, peer reviews get sent out. So if a student misses it even by a minute, which is really common.
Yeah.
You can actually set that peer review time just a little later than that.
Or
submission
a
time.
day later.
Yeah.
You know, and
Like
give them
way
that
later,
full 12 hours.
just in case. But still, there's always going to be one who's late.
And you have to warn them, and again,
then
this
it's
is
really hard to figure out how
potentially a
to
high stakes
Yeah, exactly.
thing that they should have.
So your manual really goes.
So yeah, so with my in total 40 students, it only takes me five minutes to assign them all. So assuming it was 3 times that, 15, 20 minutes, I really don't think that's that that is that much. That's me, I guess, but.
If you manually assign, can you start assigning, like even, like if students submit early before the deadline, you know, can you start pairing those students up so they can get started?
Yeah, you can assign them whatever.
That helps too.
Can you assign them in the people area? Or groups area?
When
or
you
is it-
go in, I'm thinking. When you go into the assignment, at the top right, there's a thing where it says peer reviews.
Yes.
Did you click on peer reviews and save this?
I did not say that.
Oh, you did do manually.
And then you go into peer review.
So, yeah, there.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
And then, see, this is what I mean, so you'll get this whole list. So if you do Control F, then it brings up a find function right on the page, and you can find, you probably find what yeah. And then you just click on Give Karen a submission. And then the nice thing here is click on that and type A. Okay, well, type Z, or I don't know, S is probably, it'll jump to the last name.
Right.
So if I know the last name is Sanders, I can type S-A and it'll do.
That's cool.
I don't have to scroll through it.
All right, so you're gonna be looking at.
Can I ask a question about that? How do you grade, so you have 40 students then, how do you grade them? Like, how much time
Right.
does that take you?
Well, the answer is twofold. How would I and
Yeah.
how do I?
Okay.
I'm a TA, so I don't have a lot of control over the
Right.
situation. How do I is, I do a pretty subjective, really gave effort, didn't give
Okay,
effort,
so it's like,
didn't do
did it well,
Yeah.
sort of well,
Yeah.
like just pretty
If
basic,
it were up to
okay.
me, I would actually have a rubric for the peer review. Another functional thing that we found works really nicely, because how do you give a grade? So you could have an open line item in your grade book to give a grade for peer review.
Yeah.
That requires a lot of bouncing. So what we did this semester was actually put up a discussion board that was a graded discussion board. And after students completed their peer review, they had to go post in the discussion board, I finished my peer review, which gives me an alert.
Uh-huh.
It gives me an access speed grader ability.
Yep.
I would put in attached to that discussion board a rubric that had made, you know, if I wanted to like made lots of comments, made a few comments, quality of comments, you know, made comments on the paper, filled out the rubric, so I'd figure out, you know, I haven't done that, so.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
kind
the
of,
rubrics help you both quickly say 3,
Right.
2, 1, but also there's a spot for you to add comments.
Right.
Or you can say refer to the comments and then add it in the speed grader.
And help students remember what your expectations were when they're not in front of you.
Right.
right. Okay, thank you.
But Tim, you've moved away from Canvas for some of these. Tell us more.
Some of these I have. Again, small class.
Yeah.
So what I found is, like for some of the smaller assignments, I tend to do, we have a series of assignments which I use 15 to 20 minutes of class time to peer review before they hand me a graded draft. And I just find it easier for them in their groups of threes just to move their laptop or bring their printed page and just say, hey, can you look at mine and I'll look at yours and I'll type comments. Rather than go through this kind of rigmarole. That's all. I wasn't saying it was bad. I think using this process, it's great. It gives access, but unless you have the time, like the week-long kind of process to go through, it's almost not worth it.
So there's a level of the formality of this and the extra administrative effort, both for you and the students, that in some ways you're encouraging informal feedback, or a more informal, more personal feedback, rather than go through this system to give feedback.
They can
Like,
still have
give me some feedback on this.
They can still have guidance and a rubric, and they can still assess each other's feedback, quality of feedback. I just don't always need to have control over that process.
Which gives them a little bit more agency.
It does.
A little bit more control of their own learning and responsibility for their own learning. It also encourages the social skills that we want them to have. It's often very easy to give feedback on this when we don't have the person in front of us. But in those conversations where they work together and talk in front of that person, there's a lot of extra care that is being displayed, it's like you can't say no to somebody who's sitting in front of you saying, please, can I have this? But it's very easy to say, sorry, no.
Yeah.
Right? And we want that, right? I mean, that's part of the conditions of being humans that we sort of rely on every day. It's okay.
So for those of you who have used the peer review activity within the discussion section or within the class time, have you ever experienced logistical problems with the student? You're relying on the student having their computer and showing each other, someone forget theirs, or like, I mean, is that asking too much that everybody brings computers or something like that to class or to discussion section? Or you can assume that 95%, 90% of them will have it.
Also, since they can rent computers from the libraries,
Yeah.
I ask them always to bring a computer.
So if you tell in advance, so hey, we're gonna have this peer review, bring your computer, and if you don't get one in the library, make sure you come here with it.
Yeah,
But I think you should always assume that someone won't have it and have a plan for that. I mean, that just
Yeah.
goes without
Right, or
saying.
say print something.
Yeah, I'm
right?
planning one that has, I wanna do discussion section in peer review, and we wanna add a little recording, video or audio, like 5 minutes. So I'm thinking about everybody not only looking, but also watching it with headphones. I'm thinking how much of a problem that will be, or just force, okay, watch it or listen to it before section.
Right.
Or out, trying to decide.
There are computer labs that you can also rent. So if you wanted to say, hey, we're gonna actually be, meeting in the college library computer lab, if you've got a class that accommodates that size.
And by rent, you mean reserve for free.
Oh, sorry, yes. I will take it for the semester. No, just to take it for like a day.
Yeah,
And
if I'm relying on the videos in the section, for example, that'll be safer.
Yeah, it might be easier.
And especially because like not all the students, like students who are less likely to have a personal computer are more likely to have a job that prevents them from taking the extra steps to.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable like demanding that everybody brings your computer
Right.
to class also.
Right.
Because it's like inclusive.
Yeah.
And this is a general thing that we're seeing. I think we've always seen the digital divide, and in some ways, the mobile devices are helping to really narrow that. People, on average, have more than one device, often on them at the same time, but not everyone,
Yeah.
right? And it's really important that we remember that.
Right.
So what are the alternatives, and what are the ways that when we are engaging in these fun tech-enhanced things that do help learning, that we don't forget about the people that don't have those.
Even if you're able to reserve a non-computer lab room that's close to like the college library AV pool, you could just be like, it's right there. So, right before class, spend 5 minutes.
And go there and check out.
And if you, with what John said, people have multiple devices. If somebody doesn't have a computer with them, there's probably someone in the room who's got, something extra, a tablet or something. It doesn't have to be on their own computer that they access it. They just have to be able to get to it through a computer.
Yeah.
So it can even be just, okay, let's all do all of it on my computer.
Yeah, I was thinking about groups
Right.
of three,
Yeah,
groups
you
of
could
three,
share.
and then you guys just like sit together and read and watch together, and then you just.
And then,
But you're also, we're talking about a really small percentage of students at this point that don't have a computer, don't have access. The majority will have something. If they're one, two, three, Apple kind of.
I've
Remember
often
it-
given mine to the one student who didn't bring it. I just give them mine for the activity.
yeah, open it up on
Incognito.
incognito mode and just hand it over. Also, good thing to remember, these are great for some things. Editing, not so good. Being able to read something, okay, I can do that, but don't make me try then to give my comments on here while I'm trying to read that. Pull out a piece of paper, and maybe you can, in class, take notes on, something else, and then later on, move that on to your other device, but I think you. All right, what's next? A scale. 130. Anybody bigger than 130 right now for peer review? I want to say that Tim has around 200 that he does it with. that John's been running does it and has lots of students in his political science class. What would that look like scaled up?
My first inclination is that you have to just make really simple rubrics if you're gonna assign a grade. Like it has to be fast if you're going to. I mean, I really don't know.
Especially, yes, if you go in and, so one of the things that I recall from the session that John and Vernon did on this is after having the students give each other feedback in the peer review, the students cannot legally nor can they structurally give a grade, right, to other students. But they can give the feedback. John can very quickly go through that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
They've taken, he says, 85 to 90% of the feedback that he would have had to give, and they've done it already. So he can just add like a yes, this sort of affirmation that this is important that they said. And any of the things that they missed, you know, that's only 50% of the amount of work that you would have had to do otherwise. So in some ways, if you're going to have a paper that needs deep feedback, getting 85% of the work done for 400 students is better than 85%, you know, than 100% of that amount of work that you would have to do yourself.
Right.
So in some ways, the scalability is fantastic.
Right.
If you're going to have those same types of assignments. Although if you have a 400-person class, you're probably not going to assign papers, so you have to read 400 papers, because that's just, unless you're really, we don't do that. But you could, if you have students help you do some of the evaluation and assessment.
I think a couple of things to keep in mind for scaling this up is making sure that you give students the resources they need to be able to functionally go through this. There's a lot of different places when they're assigned a peer review that it'll pop up, but I don't know if it's just an issue of not looking around or what it is, but I share out the Canvas guides on how do I find a peer review, how do I use the peer review, and we also have 2 peer reviews. The first one really serves more as a scaffold to make sure they know how to access it, so it's a real light piece that's really low stakes, and they get assigned a peer review largely just so I can make sure that they know how to find it, how to use the Canvas rendering tool rather than downloading their paper and using the Microsoft Word comments. I force them to use the Canvas rendering tool because then I can see their comments on the paper as well. So that first one is just kind of, all right, let's make sure we all know how to do this. Then when they get to the draft of the final paper, we've got all that mess out of the way, and all they have to worry about focusing on is reading it and giving the actual feedback that's quality. And that's the one I take seriously, is the draft, because the first one is, like I said, it's just that makes sense.
And it is very, very easy. Canvas has really good guides. There are a lot of things Canvas does well, there are some things they don't do well. But one of the things they do well is their guides, both written and video. They have multiple ways of doing that. For the instructor, it's very easy to go copy that link, say, to find out how to do peer reviews, click here. To find out how to see your feedback, here's a link to that. And they're very well explained. Students can use them if they need it. They can ignore them if they don't need it. They can scan through the videos very quickly if they want to find out just the one thing that they don't have. One of the things that we've seen consistently that students don't do is when you've given them feedback, they might not see it unless, in their view, there's this tiny little thing that nobody sees and it doesn't accept.
It says view feedback.
It says view feedback, but it's sort of small and they don't see it for some reason. You have to tell them to see it, and this is where it is. Click here. One way to check on that is to say, please respond to the peer review. What have you done to address these issues? Even if you say, I appreciate that review or that comment, that feedback, I disagree with it, I'm not going to do anything about it. But at least you're acknowledging it, and at least you're having them reflect on whether they should or shouldn't do that. So that's good. So some sort of a response. Does anyone, who uses rubrics for the peer review of the peer review? Anyone? Are we getting too meta here?
I don't, but like I said, I would. But it would be pretty, like I said, makes multiple comments, makes only a couple comments, doesn't make comments. Quality of comments is something I would definitely include in that rubric. That might be it, really, you know?
Yeah, because you can't get too much otherwise.
Right. Takes too long.
It takes too long, it's an extra hurdle.
But with all of those comment starters, like some students are like, but it was really good, what am I supposed to say? But, well, okay, why was it really good? What did you learn from it? How does it shape what you're gonna do next? So there's so much you could respond to a good paper. It's not an excuse for no comments.
Right.
One of the things that I love are thinking questions like, how did this apply to my own learning? If you can write a paper that makes you think about how the topic informs my own perspective, that's an effective paper. Like, you've done a good thing there. Congratulations. That's good feedback to get as well. So these are the kinds of things that they're not just on giving feedback, but by giving feedback, I'm learning more about the topic from other perspectives, which again, teacher learning, multiple means of representation, etc.
You know, this is not only good for peer review, but, you know, it's for regular discussion boards.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah, excellent.
There's a great article in our discussion board, things that we always include, that Mark Gernsbach talks about 5 ways, including things like the snowball, you know, whatever somebody says about it, here's another thing that I take that and I build off of that, here's some more information about it. And she's got the jigsaw and she's got things like, what would you say, how would you respond to this from this perspective? You know, if you have different roles. So there are a lot of great resources like this, and students learn a lot by being forced to look at things from a particular perspective way. Lauren?
I haven't done this, but thinking of what Karen was just saying, there's single point rubrics.
Yep.
And so I think for peer review, if I were to review peer review, I would probably do just a single point rubric of quality. Because that would push them to say something significant rather than looking at quantity, which could just be good job.
Right,
You know?
right.
So I wouldn't
That's a great
even
point.
have multiple criteria. I just do a single point rubric. And I did put a link to a page also on single point rubrics right there.
Thank you. That's great.
You're winning today, Lauren, by the way. Lauren's winning.
Because I'm the only one on the page
Yeah.
actually adding stuff.
MVP.
MVP is great.
I don't know that that's the best site, but that was the first one that,
Still,
you know,
helpful.
talks about it.
better than nothing.
So
The Goblin is done. Somebody can find a better site for the.
I do want to just raise a technical issue I just had this week. I had one student, and this has never happened before, and we've used this peer review on campus a lot. One student said when she went to fill out the rubric, she got not authorized, you're not authorized to use the rubric. So tech people, I just want to put that on your plate, that happened. I didn't see it happen though, this is,
Did she call the help desk?
I do not believe, we don't require them to fill out the rubric that's attached to the assignment. Well, this was the scaffold exercise anyway, so I really didn't mind so much, and I was hoping it was just gonna be a glitch and she wouldn't have that problem. I'm more interested in them leaving feedback than filling out the rubric, that I'm the one who fills it out anyway and gets the official grade, so it doesn't matter to me, but anywho. There you go.
It's a nice resource.
No one else has this question?
Yeah, that
Nelson
doesn't
else
necessarily
has it.
mean that it's going to be slower or faster to get a fix or reply, just because a lot of people have.
Yeah.
It's a site.
So one of the beautiful things
Some
about
of the
campus
glitches have
community
been there
is
for years.
it's very good about instructors finding and sharing workarounds. It's not so good about Canvas fixing problems.
Right.
What's interesting is that other students in her section were able to fill it out.
Huh.
And this is
That
the
is
only
weird.
one
That is
person
odd.
that
sounds
brought
like a
this to
you
my
problem.
I had
Right.
something similar It was just a very quick quiz. It was a 2-point quiz. Every student had access to it and most had done it, but one student was locked out. I even went in there and manually unlocked it while she sat next to me, and still nothing changed. But then the next day it was fine.
Huh.
So I've had a few little.
And those
glitches
might
like
be
that.
things like refresh the browser.
We clear
Clear your cache.
Everybody,
Yeah.
clear your cache.
Everybody's like,
Do the thing, let's do it.
That's
Maybe
right.
somebody else
Right.
can clear the
cache,
cache.
just do it.
Do it yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'm more like, no, I don't
you have
want
these
to. It's
issues,
all my homework.
share them with the help desk. We can document it. All right, what have we not talked about that we should talk about? And I know some of you have to teach, so.
Wait, what?
I guess I'd speak just a smidge to in class, out of class.
Yes.
I find that there's some level of, and I know psychology has a term for this, when you're judged on your performance.
I call it pure performance.
I find that there's some barrier that's brought down when they're doing it online in their own atmosphere. Not anonymous, it's still a name attached to it, but they're able to do it home. Maybe with less of wine, like
It's like looking
Yeah,
somebody in the
my
eye and
friend-
telling them they're having a bad hair day versus not, right?
Sure, I don't know what it is, but that's what I like about using it online, is give them that opportunity to go through it and give their feedback out of class. I'm not against following up in class, I just don't know that I would do the whole thing face to face in class.
It's the flexibility. This happens to me a lot. I'll have great ideas after the fact, but if I'm put on the spot, like my brain freezes up and I can't think of anything other than good job, or whatever. But afterwards, I'll think about it a little bit more. There's something about the comfort of your home, if I'm in a good surrounding, if I'm in a spot, and maybe I woke up with the wrong side of the bed that day, but the next day, I'm good. Or maybe I'm not a morning person, I'm in a morning class, so my brain's not working until I have my coffee. So I agree, there's something amazing about giving students the flexibility to give good quality stuff at a time. Now, there are also things that they need to do, whenever they need to do it. Certification programs, if you're having a nurse help you and you come in, you can't wait until she's had a coffee or they have a coffee
Right.
in the afternoon. They don't feel like it today, they have to perform, right? So if your course is testing that kind of stuff, sure, peer review, not necessarily always needed that. Daniel? and then Laura.
I was just gonna say, what you're saying is all true, but there's also the level that for some students, this is a linguistic and cultural, it's something they have to learn to do and that they're not confident to do it. That, for an international student, they don't know what the cultural norms are around peer review, and they're very likely to think that everybody else does, but not them. And so, one of the things, Karen, that you said earlier is that you start with low stakes and get used to the process. I like these stems that were up here, the significant comments starters, so that people know. But actually showing people, here's an example of what good peer review is. Really thinking about how, for a lot of students, this is an alien experience. And so doing it online might help with that because you can provide more support and let them choose and work through at their own pace. Doing it face-to-face can be really high pressure and stressful for students, particularly international students, and for people just whose life experience up to that point hasn't ever taken them through this.
And often it's both, right? You have a little bit during class, so you can start to see, feel some of the pressure of it, have a chance to go back and think about it a little bit better, see examples, especially examples from other students. Fantastic.
And I would say with that, in my perception of things, setting the task up so that it's appropriate for the students who are going to have the most barriers to doing it is probably going to mean that you do a really excellent job for everybody else. And so actually thinking about how can I make this as accessible an experience as possible and really reinforce is, though, for those students who are the most vulnerable, is also going to really improve the experience for everybody. That it's not, you know, that it's benefit to think like that for all the students.
In yesterday's session on universal design beyond accessibility, there's a graphic there that talked about designing for the extremes, because if you design for the extremes, then you're going to get, you know, the people in the middle. Well, we often do those. We often design for the middle, thinking, well, we're going to cover the most people, and then these people are kind of out. So, yeah, that idea of who are the ones that need the most structure or different kinds of access. What do you think about that?
It's just one comment to reinforce. I think, you know, both the written and oral thing can be complementary. And to me, it always felt like the written part, in a way, is much more important as preparation for the verbal part. You know, so for example, if you have somebody that's more introvert or, you know, culturally different in that they don't want to express what they feel, they can do it in writing first, and then at least everybody knows in the face-to-face part of the process what that person would be thinking already, because they have read it before. And so that to me seems like the right sequence. I mean, at least in my experience, I mean, that's been most successful.
There's also something about the multiple modes here, though, as well, right? Sometimes giving written feedback is easier than giving oral feedback, but oftentimes oral feedback is more effective to hear than written feedback. We had a great session last spring where the speaker talked about, he uses this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And his feedback, he'll actually, was it a videotape or screen capture feedback, so we can say, oh, you know, in paragraph 2, and we'll highlight that paragraph, you talk about this. He says that students respond to it very well because you get the nonverbals, you get the inflection of the voices, you get this, and it's directly related to that. Oftentimes the written feedback has no verbals or nonverbals to it, so it seems harsher than it actually is. So and it's harder to give that nonverbal or that feedback verbally than it is to write it, right? Because you have to think through, but also great practice in giving feedback. So it's a skill that we want them to do. I don't know, maybe for later in the semester. Maybe.
I would want to put in a plug in 2 ways for the Writing Center. One of those ways is that the Writing Center also offers an online consultation process where students get that kind of screencast about their work if they have to identify what it is that they're interested in. So as a potential model, that's something that people might be able to walk you through. There's also a Writing Center outreach team that can help co-teach things like how do we give a productive peer review, and basically work with you and meet with your class co-teaching together to say like, hey, how do we give productive comments? So you have additional support in both understanding the tech logistics of the screencast one-on-one and in maybe facilitating that conversation.
Yeah, Writing Center is a fantastic. If you've used it, you know. And if you haven't, you should.
I'm curious, can students leave comments?
Yes.
The audio comments? They can.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I believe it's capped at 5 minutes.
That's fine. Nobody wants more than that. That's fine.
You get power for my feedback.
Another comment before, but I really like the point that you brought up about this difference for international students.
Yeah.
And it can be actually really, I mean, you learn after being here for a while, but it can be very different the way that people relate and give feedback to each other in conversations far more informally in the United States, even to compare to other Western countries, let alone for other cultures. And I think that's a good point. And I wonder if there's some resource from either ISS, kind of like a guideline. Hey, like it's okay to be very direct when you're giving feedback to someone around here. It's not considered to be rude, as it is in some other places. At the same time, like the level of politeness here is very high, and then we kind of help you to navigate and still be to the point, and kind of just makes people feel comfortable, because I think thinking about as an undergrad or as like a visiting student, which happens a lot as well, I can see now that can be hard.
So Heidi and Tim and previously me, they work in the ESL program here, and so how to do feedback was just structurally part of the whole writing program that they had. Starting quite early, like most of the students were getting 2 or 3 semesters of support around academic writing and doing peer review. And then toward the end of that, we would start setting the direction of the Writing Center. But there have been some administrative decisions made that have reduced how many of the students on campus are getting that support. Transfer students are no longer getting that support. So there's about 400 students that are now walking around campus that haven't been through the program and would have been and are not getting it. So that unfortunately is a high-level decision that shifted those students out into out of that program, and so they're not going to be getting trained in peer review. But it was something that I spoke from experience that teaching people cultural norms about peer review was like a months-long process. You had to really build people's confidence that they know how to do it. There is a support on campus in the ESL program, but not everybody's getting it. Majority do.
But can I direct my students to this?
Usually they're placed into it, so that's the problem. And some of them are not being placed into it anymore.
Yeah, always.
Graduate students, yes. Graduate students can, but undergraduates, they're not classes that people generally choose to take. They're classes that people are assigned to.
We are having a session on the soft skills coming up in the end of March. And I think that this is probably because how do we navigate and survive not just the campus and the school setting, but the real world practices of the disciplines that we're going into. We do that sort of subconsciously, but we don't often think about how do we formalize that? How do we help people navigate these spaces? So if you know anyone who can talk on this, I'm always looking for speakers, presenters.
There's someone in continuing studies who offers a class online. His name's Matt Hora, Hora.
Yeah.
You might want to contact him.
Yeah, I talked to him.
You
He said
did.
he was going to come, but then he's like, I've got a conference that day.
Okay.
So who else?
I'm going to be on a train if you want to try and beam me in. But I'm assuming there's Wi-Fi.
That online class, by the way, is very helpful. I took it. I don't remember the cost. It wasn't much.
Okay.
But
yeah.
it's
Great.
It's really great. Continuing studies, it's teaching soft skills in the college classroom.
We are out of time.
I'll put it in there.
Any other questions that came up that you'd like to talk to me about afterwards? I'm happy to do that. If on your way out, you can check a few boxes, add a few ideas, write down names of people who can talk on those topics. And this topic as well. Have you guys seen the Dark and Stormy Night? Dark and Stormy Night, you get an award for like the worst beginning of a. And so we have people who give assignments on like make the worst possible blah blah blah, and it's a way to help them learn the
Learn
systems.
from mistakes.
Right, purposeful mistakes. I don't have anybody who can contribute to this right now, so if you know of anybody, I'm looking desperately for people help me out with that and share those kinds of assignments.
Makes me want to do that.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that too.
Can you zoom out, please?
Whoa. Oh, on the activity sheet, which is on our.
I got 4 different